Okay, so now we're going to create a function to filter our items. So if we were to add a bunch of stuff here, I'm just going to type some stuff in. Let's say milk, eggs, let's say meat, cheese, and let's also say eggnog. I want two things that are kind of similar. So we'll add those. And what I want to do is be able to type in here and narrow this down as I type. So if you'd like to pause the video and try it yourself, you can look at this as a challenge. But we're going to go ahead and do this. So let's come down to where our event listeners are, and we want it on the filter, which I believe, has a variable of item filter. We're getting it by ID of filter. So let's, I'll just copy this down, and then we'll change this to, let's say, item filter. And instead of listening for a click, we could do a few things. We could do like key up or key down. I'm going to use an input event, which will also capture typing. And then we want to call a function called filter items. So basically, every time we enter input, it'll call this function. Now I want to put it above the check UI. I want that at the bottom. So right here, we'll say function, and let's say filter items, and we're going to pass in our event object here. And the first thing I want to do is get the text that is being typed. So let's create a variable here called text, and then remember, we can get that with e.target. That'll give us the element that the event is on, which is the input. And remember, with an input, we can use the value property to get that. So let's do a console log here of text. Now when I save, all that stuff's going to go away, so I guess I'll just try to add this quick app. You know what? For this specific lesson, let's actually uncomment these. Since we don't have any persisting with local storage or anything, I don't want to have to keep adding stuff. So I do want to just change. Let's change Oreos to eggs, and then let's add another one, and this one will be eggnog. Okay, so now we have some static items here that we can filter. So once again, if I click in filter and I start to type, you'll see that it captures my input down here. All right, now I want to also make this lowercase, and the reason for that is when we compare it to the items that are here, we're also going to make these lowercase so that there's no issues with, we're entering lowercase, but there's an uppercase letter here in this one, or we're entering uppercase and there's lowercase. We just want to make everything lowercase. So we can just add on the method to lowercase, which we learned about a long time ago. So if I do that, even if I put in here, A, capital A, you'll see that it's a lowercase a. All right, so that's the first step, is to actually get the text. Now we want to get the list items, okay, these tags right here. Now I don't have it in the global scope. Remember, when we use the check UI, we got them in here in this function. So we don't have access to this items, so we could just copy that, and let's put that in here in the filter. Okay, so now we have access to the items. And then what we're going to do is loop through these items. So let's say items, and we should be able to use for each because this is a node list. If you use something like get elements by tag name or something like that, one of the older methods, which I haven't used in ages, but if you did use that, it wouldn't be a node list, it would be an HTML collection. So in that case, you would have to wrap this in array.from like that, because that will turn the HTML collection into an array so that you can use for each. All right, but we can use for each on this. So let's say item, and then in our function, we're going to, first off, let's get the text content of each item. So we'll say const, and just say, we'll call this item name, right? Actually, before we do that, let me just show you what we get if we do a console log of each item. So I'm just going to type in here, I'll just hit A, and you'll see it's just going to give us every list item that's in here, right? Because we're looping through those items. So once again, let's go ahead and say const and item name, because we don't want the whole tag and everything in it. We just want the text, the item name. And we can do that by selecting the item, which is the list item, the li tag, and then let's get the first child inside of that, and that's going to be the text, right? Because if we look at the HTML, we're looking at the li tag. The first child in here is going to be the text node. So let's actually do a console log of item name. So now we'll just go and filter and just put anything, and you'll see we get the text of each of these. Okay, now this is basically the node. So what we could do here, because we don't want like the quotes and that stuff, so we could do .text content, and then if we type something in here, now we get just the text. All right, so now we have both what's being typed in, which is text, and then in here we have the item name. So we basically just have to compare these two. So, and you know what, let's actually make this lowercase too. So 2 lowercase. Oops. And just to test that one more time, let's just type something in here. Now you see that's all lowercase. So we just need to match these two. And there's a few ways we can do this. What I'm going to do is in an if statement, I'm going to check the item name, and I'm going to use the index of method. And inside index of, we can pass in the text that's typed in. So what's going to happen is if the text that's typed in matches the item name, so if I put an A in here and any of these have an A, then it's going to be true. If not, then it's going to be a -1. That's how index of works. If it doesn't match, it equals -1. So I want to make sure, I want to test if it matches. So I'll say if it's not equal to -1, then that means it matches. So just for now, let's do a console log, and we'll just say true. And then let's have an else, and then we'll do a console log, and we'll say false. So let's try that out. So I'm going to go in the filter. Make sure you go in the filter, not this enter item. And I'm going to type in an A. And I get 2 true and 3 false. And the way this works is it's going to test to see if there's an A anywhere, not just if it begins with A. So you'll see apples obviously has an A, and orange juice has an A. The other 3 don't. So that's why we have 2 true and 3 false. If I put a P, then what we get next is 1 true and 4 false, because AP only matches apples. The other 4 are false. Now obviously we don't just want a console log, we want to show the ones that match. So what we'll do is take the item and then the style and the display property, and we want to set that. Now I don't want to set it to block, because if you look at let's go to the elements tab, and if you hover over and you click on one of these list items, you'll see it's set to display flex by default. So that's what we want for the show, is the default of flex. All right, and then let's just go back to the console here. And then for if it doesn't match, then let's get rid of this, and let's set this to display none. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and now I'll type an A in here, and everything goes away except for apples and orange juice, because the other ones don't match, so they're being set to display none. If I put a P, runs again, and now it only matches apples. If I put a W after that, that doesn't match anything. Okay, and it's gonna be in real time. We don't have to like submit or anything like that. If I put egg, then that's gonna obviously match both eggs and eggnog. So that's all there is to it. And there's other ways you could do this, other methods and stuff, but this is a pretty simple way of doing this and pretty effective. So I'm going to go back to the index.html, and let's just going to undo this and then comment everything out, because we don't want those to be there. But if I type in, let's say egg or eggs, eggnog, and let's say apples, and then I come down to the filter and I put in E. So there's an E in all of them. If I put a G, it's only going to match eggs and eggnog. Okay, if I do EGGN, that only matches eggnog. So now we have our filter input working.